So this is also why you see athletes under chiropractic care. This component right here, benefiting not only from overall health and wellness, but also to give them a cutting edge advantage over their competition. Mood, stress, pain, using noisy, incomplete, or even misleading information. So the system adapts, but it's adapting inefficiently. Remember, bad input equals bad output. Truly understanding why all of these things are happening, it kind of gives you more of an understanding of why you hear all these testimonials, all these things from chiropractic care. And some people, they don't even understand it, they don't correlate all these things, but you have to understand you're rewiring the brain. And when you rewire the brain, you start to allow the body to function the way that it was designed to. Hello everybody, welcome to Health and Wellness. I'm your host, Dr. Philip McBride, and this is part 2 to the last episode of how chiropractic affects the brain. So if you're new, like I said, this is information, educational information to help people understand how to take control over their health. I say it all the time, I said it in the last video. Some people don't understand the subtle difference between the truth and what pleases the ear. And when you get this knowledge, when you get this wisdom, you start to make different action steps. I hope that something I said in the last video, my next video, whatever, I just hope something that I say can resonate with the listener and allow them to make better decisions and turn into the person that God designed them to be in terms of taking action over their health. But again, I'm gonna dive straight into it. So fun fact, I'm actually still recording. See, I'm sitting in the same shirt. This was just a very, very long video on part 1, so I want to split it into 2 episodes. So again, this is part 2 of the last episode of how chiropractic affects the brain. So if you missed it, understand that there are a lot of amazing things that come from chiropractic. And today, what I'm about to speak about explains really how the brain is being rewired and why we see these amazing things. So recap a few things. So what chiropractors do specifically is identify and remove subluxations. These are those vertebral fixations in the spine that cause that physiological and neurological compromise within the body. And we do this because we see this compromise. So the very system that controls all function and healing in the body, it needs to operate effectively for you to live the way that you're supposed to live. So literally everything is controlled by your nervous system. So again, the last episode I spoke about how subluxations affect the brain and how powerful chiropractic care can impact in improving this functioning. So referring specifically to the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. Really cool information. If you missed it, definitely tune into that. Really, really cool. But today I'm going to dive deep into the prefrontal cortical firing, the cerebellum integration, and neurochemical modulation. This is so exciting. So real quick, before we go any deeper, let's zoom out for a second and let me recap something. So one of the biggest things that chiropractic supports neurologically is the prefrontal cortex. There's so much research on this. So I spoke about this on part 1, okay? So the prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain responsible for focus, decision-making, planning, emotional regulation, and your ability to think clearly while you're doing something physically. Excuse me. So when the prefrontal cortex is online and communicating efficiently with the rest of the brain, your actions feel intentional, controlled, and coordinated. So when it's understimulated or it's overwhelmed, or you have a subluxation altering the way that your prefrontal cortex is able to function, things feel scattered mentally and physically. Guys, understand what the chiropractic adjustment does. This precise neurological input improves the quality of sensory input coming into the brain, so the prefrontal cortex has accurate information to work with. And that brings us to the cerebellum. So the cerebellum is the part of the brain that constantly monitors and fine-tunes how you move, a lot of the balance component within your body. So its job is not to create movement, but to refine it, adjusting balance, posture, coordination, timing, and precision in real time. It does this by continuously receiving sensory information from your spine, joints, and muscles. Things like joint position, movement speed, and tension. So that information comes from mechanoreceptors, muscle splinters, Golgi tendon organs, and joint receptors. A lot of things that I talked about in part 1. Some things I talked about in another episode when I talked about what chiropractic is and how it works. But the cerebellum, it takes all of this input and it builds a moment by moment map of your body and where it is in space and how it's moving. So this map is then shared with the sensorimotor cortex, which is the area of the brain responsible for planning, movement, and carrying it out. So the sensorimotor cortex uses the cerebellar input to decide how much force to use, when to activate muscles, and how to adjust movement on the fly. So this is where cortical firing comes in, right? So we're talking about this integration between cortical firing and cerebellum. So cortical firing simply refers to how your neurons communicate through electrical signals. So when sensory input is clear and well-timed, neurons fire in an organized, efficient pattern. So signals arrive on time, in the right sequence, and with the right intensity. Movements feel smooth, automatic, and effortless instead of stiff and forced. So the cerebellum also feeds this refined information forward to the prefrontal cortex. Again, if you missed part 1, you have to look at part 1. Super cool information. Like I said, this is the region of the brain that I spoke about earlier related to allowing you to think, plan, and move at the same time. So walking while talking, reacting quickly, maintaining posture with conscious effort, or just adjusting your body automatically without even thinking about it. That's what the prefrontal cortex is. So when there's a subluxation, the issue isn't just about that joint motion. It's distorted sensory input. So these deep paraspinal mechanoreceptors and muscle spindles, they stop sending clear, accurate signals to the cerebellum. Instead of sharp, detailed picture of the body, the cerebellum receives a blurry, inconsistent information. Now, imagine the cerebellum trying to fine-tune movement while getting a delayed signal or getting a delayed, blurry video feed of the body. So the picture is still there, but it's not sharp and it's not in real time. It's like a video game when it lags. You guys know what I'm talking about if you're a gamer. So the timing gets off. In the cortical firing, it becomes less efficient because the brain has to slow down and double check every single signal. So the sensorimotor cortex and the prefrontal cortex are still trying to plan and execute movement, but they're doing it based off outdated and fuzzy information. So instead of smooth and automatic motion, everything requires more effort and conscious control. So this is why you see slow reflexes, clumsy movement, balance issues, stiffness, poor coordination, and even difficulty multitasking. So the brain has trouble thinking clearly while it's moving. So it's not that the brain is broken or anything like that. It's compensating for this miscommunication, constantly correcting for an image that isn't even accurate, right? Now, I say this all the time because it's important to understand. Even Hippocrates, the man who worked 400 years before the birth of Jesus Christ, known as the father of medicine, he even said it. Diseases don't appear out of the blue. They are developed from small daily sins committed against nature. And once enough daily sins have been accumulated, that's when illnesses appears. So understand, dysfunction left uncorrected, it gets worse. Dysfunction over time, it leads to disease all the time. So over time, this chronic disruption of cerebellar input has been associated with cerebellar-based neurodegenerative and neurofunctional disorders. So including conditions like ataxia, Parkinson's, balance disorders, and age-related motor decline, and even things like Alzheimer's and Huntington's are things where cerebellar dysfunction is involved in. So while chiropractic doesn't treat any of these things, right? And I also talked about this in another video. It's not that we're curing any of these conditions, but what we do is we remove the interference in the nervous system, and this improves the quality of the timing of the sensory input in the cerebellum, to the cerebellum. And what this does, this helps support better movement efficiency, improve balance, reduce rigidity, and enhance functional capacity, ultimately improving the quality of life. So a chiropractic adjustment, it restores proper joint motion and rapidly increases quality proprioceptive input into the nervous system. So think of it like clearing static from a signal. So mechanoreceptors in the spine suddenly fire with clarity and precision, sending a surge of clean sensory information upward. So that input, what it does is it reaches the cerebellum, sharpening its map and the body almost immediately. So with a clear picture coming from the cerebellum, The sensory-motor cortex adjusts movements smoothly, and the prefrontal cortex can plan and execute without any interference. So instead of overcorrecting or compensating, the brain and body and moves as a coordinated unit. So what this looks like in real life is the thing that we see patients benefit from all of the time. So things like smoother and more precise movement, better posture and balance, faster reflexes, improved coordination and timing, easier multitasking different things, enhanced cognitive motor integration, and more confident in fluid movement. And by the way, I should have mentioned this earlier. So this is also why you see athletes under chiropractic care. This component right here, benefiting not only from overall health and wellness, but also to give them a cutting edge advantage over their competition. So at its core, chiropractic, it helps restore clarity to the nervous system. And when the cerebellum receives accurate information, the cortex fires efficiently. The prefrontal cortex can lead effectively, and then you're not forcing the system to work. You're allowing it to function the way that it was designed to. So, all of this is super fascinating information. Isn't this so cool? So I like to nerd out about all of these things, but truly understanding why all of these things are happening, it kind of gives you more of an understanding of why you hear all these testimonials, all these things from chiropractic care. And some people, they don't even understand it. They don't correlate all these things, but you have to understand you're rewiring the brain. And when you rewire the brain, you start to allow the body to function the way that it was designed to. So let's move on to the next one. The next part is honestly one of my favorite things to talk about. And not just because of how cool it is in neuroscience. I have a really, really deep emotional connection to the understanding of this. Because when you truly understand this piece, you realize how much of who you are, how you feel, how you think, how you respond to stress, pain, joy, motivation is tied directly to how well your nervous system is communicating. And this is where chiropractic goes way beyond just joints and pain. So let's talk about the neurochemicals. So these are the neurotransmitters. And for those who don't know, these are chemical messengers of your nervous system. So neurons don't just fire electricity and call it a day. They communicate by releasing these chemicals across synapses to pass information forward. So these are some things that people have heard of, like dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, and these aren't just feel-good chemicals like how some people would describe it. It's much more than that. So these chemicals literally shape how you experience life. They influence how you're motivated, how you feel when you wake up, how resilient you are under stress, how deeply you sleep, how your body perceives pain, how calm you are, how anxious you are, your baseline feels, and even how connected you are to the present and how you feel within your body. So this isn't just physical or mental, it pours directly into your emotional regulation and even your spiritual presence. Being more spiritually connected with the version that God designed you to be. Because when your neurochemistry is balanced, people often describe feeling more grounded, clearer, and more themselves. Not overstimulated, not numb, just regulated, right? So I love talking about this. So in simple terms, think of it like this. So think of your neurotransmitters like volumes knob and dimmer switches in the brain. So they don't create thoughts or movement by themselves. They regulate how intensely signals are experienced within you. So there's so many, and I showed a few earlier, but using some examples of what they think they're like dopamine. Dopamine influences motivation, drive, reward, and focus. Serotonin, it stabilizes your mood, your sleep, your emotional regulation. You have endorphins, which modulate pain and stress and creating resilience and recovery. So many different kinds, but when these are balanced, the nervous system adapts smoothly, and when they're not, everything feels harder, a lot harder than they should. And by the way, neurotransmitters never work alone. And this is crucial to understand. So when I hear people trying to balance and regulate all these individual ones, they're not fully understanding this concept. So the nervous system, understand this. So the nervous system isn't a set of isolated switches. It's a living, adaptive network where chemical signals constantly influence and regulate one another in real time. So a shift in one pathway creates a ripple effect throughout this entire system. So, I can let me give you a few examples like dopamine. So dopamine influences serotonin. Serotonin affects GABA. GABA regulates glutamate. Norepinephrine alters dopamine sensitivity. Melatonin feeds back to serotonin. Endorphins interact with your dopamine reward circuits. So everything works together, right? So this process isn't linear. It's layered, dynamic, and self-correcting, and adjusting day by day, moment by moment, based on sensory input, movement, stress, thought, and the environment that you're surrounded in. So that's why even subtle disruptions in the neurological signaling can lead to wide-ranging physical, emotional, and cognitive symptoms. And also why improving the quality of the nervous system input can create system-wide change. So an easy example of something a lot of people have heard of is serotonin and melatonin, especially when it comes to mood and sleep. So serotonin plays a major role in mood stability, emotional regulation, and digestion, also pain modulation as well. But melatonin is produced from serotonin and controls sleep timing and that circadian rhythm. So when serotonin signaling is off, mood becomes unstable, anxiety increases, and sleep quality declines. And then when you have melatonin timing disrupted, sleep becomes fragmented, recovery suffers, and that hormonal rhythm, it starts to fall out of sync. So when someone struggles with sleep, it's rarely just sleep. It's often a neurochemical timing and regulation issue. And it's tied to how well your nervous system is organizing itself. So another example, so this is something I feel like some people don't know about. So this is in relationship with glutamate and GABA and dopamine. Glutamate with your brain is a neurotransmitter that's correlated with learning, movement, irritation, focus, all these things. GABA being the primary neurotransmitter, which defines, calms, and stabilizes neural firing. And then dopamine, a lot of people heard about dopamine, but it fine-tunes those circuits in prioritizing different things for action, motivation, reward. So in simple terms, it's like glutamate presses the gas, GABA applies the brakes, and dopamine decides the direction. So too much glutamate can lead to anxiety and overstimulation. Low GABA reduces stress tolerance and sleep quality. Inefficient dopamine signaling affects your motivation, your movement efficiency, and your mental clarity. So, like I said, this is important because optimal function isn't about having more or less of one chemical. It's about timing, balance, and coordination between all three of these. So let's take all of this information and let's talk about how your body expresses when these systems aren't functioning well. So it's things you might see, and these are things that I see all the time in the office. So chronic stress or anxiety that just doesn't seem to go away. You can't turn it off. Low motivation, brain fog, or emotional flatness. Poor sleep or never feeling rested, that chronic fatigue feeling people describe. Heightened pain sensitivity or even slower recovery time. And then even things like feeling overwhelmed by things that didn't used to feel overwhelming to you. So here's the key point. This doesn't mean that your brain is broken. Same thing I said earlier. Just like I've been saying the entire time, it means that your brain is responding to bad information. Bad input equals bad output. So again, when subluxations are present, this alters that sensory input from the spinal mechanoreceptor. So that distorted input travels upstream to the brain, specifically the brainstem, the limbic system, and the hypothalamus. That's what we're talking about right now. So the very regions that regulate all of these neurotransmitter outputs. So now the brain is trying to regulate mood, stress, pain using noisy, incomplete, or even misleading information. So the system adapts, but it's adapting inefficiently. Remember, bad input equals bad output. This is how you can be doing all the right things and still feel off. It's something I say all the time. I see it all the time. It's just people need to understand, really, there are so many different aspects of health. So people focusing on all of these different aspects of creating vibrant, healthy life in their bodies, but dismissing the fact that all of these aspects, these essentials, they all work together. Each of these things, and I'll do probably a whole separate episode on this of the 5 essentials of health, but each of these things play a different role of how your body functions and heals. And many people, they come into the office with a very dysregulated nervous system and they don't even realize it. And most people don't even consider the importance of the chiropractic essential, which is removing the interference in the nervous system to help regulate all function and healing within the body. A lot of the time, people say they feel off because the nervous system is compensating instead of regulating. So A chiropractic adjustment, what this does is it removes that interference, like I keep talking about. It restores precise joint motion and clean sensory input into the nervous system. And that high quality input influences key regulatory systems, centers, all of these things within the brain. So deep in the brain, there are these control centers that help keep everything running smoothly. So they fine-tune chemical messengers like serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine, the ones that shape our mood, stress levels, and motivations. And when these systems start working together more efficiently, the brain starts releasing things like endorphins, our natural pain relief hormone or chemical, and helping the body feel calmer and more at ease. So in simple terms, the nervous system shifts from survival mode back into regulation mode. So in the office, we see this with real patients all the time. And it doesn't usually show up as some dramatic overnight change. What you see is subtle, but it's powerful. They report feeling calmer without feeling sedated. Their sleep, it slowly starts to improve. Pain, a lot of people come to chiropractic for pain, but it becomes easier to tolerate, or it even just resolves and diminishes altogether. Stress, it doesn't hit as hard. Motivation slowly comes back online. And then emotional reactions, they feel more proportional. So you often hear people say things like they just feel more like themselves again. So research and clinical observations consistently show changes in the autonomic balance of the autonomic nervous system, which improves stress resilience, altered pain perception, and shifts in the brain activity following chiropractic care. These are the things that they study. So studies demonstrate changes in cortical processing, brainstem functioning, and neurochemical regulation after adjustments. And clinically, chiropractors, we see this all the time. We've been seeing this for decades. So not because that we're treating mood or chemistry directly, but because when you remove the interference within the nervous system does what it's designed to do. So, man, really, really cool information. But to finish this off, this is so much fascinating information. But like I always say, when you become more knowledgeable about your health and how your body functions, you gain wisdom. And it directly correlates with the actions that you make. So I really do that this information relays to someone and leads them in the right direction, like I said, to the version of themselves that God designed them for. But that's everything for today. I could dive so deep into all of these things, but if you like this kind of stuff, all I ask is subscribe, follow, leave a like, comment, a whole bunch of things like that. So that way more people that think the way that we think can find us and actually gain access to this information and possibly use this information to benefit their health. But that's going to be it for today. I love doing these podcasts. I really enjoyed doing this. I know I was a little bit all over the place. I was getting a little bit passionate, but like I said, this is something I like to do. So if you want to see more episodes like this, like I said, make sure you subscribe. But until next time, I'll see you guys then. Thank you for watching.